In the woods of Midlothian, Illinois, just off one busy road and one dead road that is busy no longer, sits a 200-year-old cemetery called Bachelor's Grove. You may have heard of it before from the creepy legends of the place, or you may have seen the famous Ghost Adventures episode.
Years of violence and neglect have transformed this hallowed ground into a haunted playground.
What is often dubbed the most haunted cemetery in the US is an unusual case. Yes, it houses the dead and was even the site of verified vandalism and general ruffian behavior, but all we have are the words of thousands of people who have been here and had paranormal experiences. As Ursula Bielski writes in Haunted Bachelor's Grove, people change in Bachelor's Grove. Or perhaps their masks come off here. Whichever it is, the ones close to the grove know that it is not a place where one should stay long or come often. To do so is to risk losing oneself to its infamous pull. So, is Bachelor's Grove Cemetery really haunted? And why is it so famous? Come learn with me. Happy Halloween, folks. It's a much shorter video this time, and there's also no sponsor. I'm doing some traveling, and this was a last-minute topic, so it's really just a quick, silly, fun one while I work on the larger spooky video that will be coming next month. So let's get into it. Grab your audio recorders and your spirit boxes. It's time to meet some ghosts.
This is Bachelor's Grove Cemetery, with graves dating back to the 1840s. Stories are told of blue ghost lights, disappearing houses, and other strange activity out here. Perhaps the most interesting is the moving tombstone, a 700-pound stone just behind me that moves from spot to spot on certain nights. It is said that visitors here in the cemetery see it in one location. When they look back, it's moved to somewhere else.
I gotta be honest, there is not a lot about the scary Bachelor's Grove legends that is actually verifiable. The stories go that the nearby pond was where Chicago mobsters like Al Capone would dump some bodies that they dealt with. Indeed, apparently someone has fished up an old gun from the lake, but supposedly there have not been any recovered human remains. The other legend says that in the 60s and 70s, the area was rife with satanic rituals. Cloaked people standing around fires, chanting, that sort of thing, classic stuff. The cops reported some decapitated animals. It's compelling, sure, but again, nothing super verifiable. No one really knows if they're actually like members of the Satanic Church or just weirdos or teens messing around or people just looking to scare passersby. But as early as the 50s, rumors were going around about how haunted the Grove was. Very helpfully, the meticulous efforts of the folks who run bachelorsgrove.com have resulted in a comprehensive list of every legend that Bachelor's Grove has to offer. The most famous, because it was seen on Ghost Adventures, is the blue light. There are hundreds of independent reports of people seeing a huge blue light about 2 feet wide floating through the nearby woods or around the pond. It seems to be trying to lead people away from the cemetery and has been reported since the 60s, often by entire groups of people. Another legend, which is particularly silly, is the ghost caretaker, where for decades people have claimed to be harassed by the ghost of a crazy, murderous cemetery caretaker. And then it turned out that there was this local guy named Rick who started calling himself the caretaker, and people began assuming that he's a ghost. And when someone reported this to him, he thought it was really funny and started telling people that he's a ghost. Rick seems to be a compulsive liar because he's made up a bunch of tall tales about his backstory or the cemetery itself. Gotta love it. I love a local weirdo. Another weird character is the Madonna of Bachelor's Grove. Now, every goddamn haunted location on Earth has a white lady or a lady in gray, and this is no different. She is a woman seen in a white dress on moonlit nights, wandering aimlessly through the cemetery with a baby in her arms. It's especially eerie because the most famous tombstone at the cemetery is the little one that simply reads "Infant Daughter" and is usually covered with the most offerings out of any tombstone in the entire cemetery. Could this be the infant daughter and her mother? Who knows? Well, those are the most famous ones, but other popular legends include a phantom dog, a farmer and his horse, a red light, and a disappearing house. Very spooky. To get a closer perspective on Bachelor's Grove, I had a chat through Instagram DMs with Tara Von Lusk, who grew up in the Bachelor's Grove area. Here's what it was like in their words. One of the first times I was finally allowed to go to Bachelor's Grove with my family, it was me and my siblings and my cousins. I was riding my bike, which never had problems before. So right at the entrance, the spot across from the parking lot, my chain broke. All of us were freaked out by it. It happened right at the entrance, almost as a beware of coming in. Of course, we went in anyways. The path leading to the cemetery had a 50-50 chance of being cleared or some sort of a mess of brush and overgrowth. For me, that's when the feeling of being watched started to set in. Like walking into a different world almost. Anyways, the cemetery was much more unkept at this time. Broken headstones everywhere, defaced graves, tall grass, more trees, and I'm not sure if they had the area fenced in yet. The tree cover kept it dark and creepy in the cemetery portion. Immediately you feel strange being there. Like truly you're disturbing the space. I was always respectful, but I can't say the same for my siblings and cousins who would stand on graves and try to scare each other. A girl down my street said that a shadowed apparition followed her home and it really freaked her out. Said it messed with her a lot. I had a friend who lived on the turnpike itself, 143rd, maybe 5 houses down from the entrance. She told me that they had a lot of weird things happen. Lights flickering on and off, cabinets opening on their own. Before I went the first time, the lore was something my Aunt Mary shared with us, sitting in her sunroom at night as she read out this book that told stories of Bachelor's Grove, and of course, the image of the ghostly woman on the grave. So it was like, folklore tradition in a way. It was just disorienting, and you always feel like you're being watched. Pockets of cold and the feeling of walking into spider webs, unrecognizable sounds, probably animals, but the brain thinks it's a spirit. Some siblings have felt breath on the back of their necks or heard it. I would say that everyone has a story about this place, whether it be apparitions, being followed, distant shrieks. We all had something happen to us there. People also talk of waking up with scratches after visiting. Lots of folklore about bringing unwanted spirits back. Locally, we love the Grove. It's almost a rite of passage to go there. You grow up hearing all the stories of your friends and family, and then the stories of what has been published. Kids going with their friends to freak each other out, teenagers engaging in teenager activities and coming back with scary stories to tell, and adults who pass on all of those experiences to the next generation. I honestly don't think I know of a person who has gone and not felt something. I would say Bachelor's Grove has a huge place in many of the locals' coming-of-age stories, and honestly, most people believe in the spirits and scariness of the place. When you visit and then you leave because something creeped you out, or it's about to be dark and you don't want to find out what could be waiting for you after dark. You don't leave because it's time to go, you leave because it's like, something tells me we should get the fuck out. So many times I left that place running. Thank you again, Tara, for sharing your story. It basically confirms pretty much everything that I've read, that so many people who visit the cemetery see or hear unexplainable things, or generally get the feeling that something wants them to leave. But what's the true history of Bachelor's Grove? So Bachelor's Grove isn't just a cemetery, it was a whole settlement dating back to around the 1820s when British and Irish settlers arrived from the Northeast and later came Germans. The settlement was clearly large and included areas where timber was cut for construction in the Chicagoland area, much like the surrounding timberlands, which were named after local families like Cooper's Grove, Gooding's Grove, etc. Bachelor's Grove is a name that evolved from a local family called the Backelders, although another claim from the 1830s states that it got its name from the 4 bachelors who lived at the Grove. This one has numerous contemporary sources, but modern research shows that the area was already called Bachelor's Grove before the single dudes showed up, so frankly, who really knows? Naturally, any settlement needed a cemetery for their dearly departed. The Bachelor's Grove Cemetery is one of the oldest in Cook County. It's passed many hands, independently so, until its last trustee, Clarence Fulton. The cemetery was condemned in 1976 and is now owned by the Forest Preserve and managed by the Cook County Cemetery Trustees, who now manage the upkeep. This came after several attempts on Clarence's part to get outside help caring for the cemetery. It was totally overgrown until fairly recently. Its current state can largely be credited to the efforts of the Grove Restoration Project, an operation of volunteers and the descendants of some of the cemetery residents who took on removing all of the overgrowth and restoring some of the remaining monuments. Although there's a lot of headstones that we still don't really know where they are because they were stolen, recovered, and then people figured that they just couldn't put them back because they'd just be stolen again, so... These efforts took a long time, too, from about 1998 to 2014. The road that leads to the cemetery was formerly part of the now-defunct Midlothian Turnpike, and many of the early settler roads still exist in fragments in the woods. By the mid-century, the woods in the cemetery were becoming the hot place to be for sneaky and daring teens looking for a place to drink underage and canoodle. But when the turnpike closed, the cemetery obviously was more off the beaten path, even though it's still very close to the road. And its place hidden in the woods, slowly becoming overgrown, meant that it became a big draw for delinquents looking to cause trouble. Grave desecration, headstone theft and destruction, unauthorized exhumations, and graffiti were rife in the 60s to 80s. Of course, there were also the rumors of satanic rituals, and plenty of eyewitnesses to back that up, although with no first-hand accounts from any participants, it's still hard to say what actually was going on, and you do need to keep in mind this was happening during the Satanic Panic, so take anything involving Satanists from this era with a grain of salt. Today, the Grove has been the site of many, many things other than just vandalism or hauntings. It has seen photo shoots, weddings, independent films, natural research, wildlife restoration, geocaching, art projects, concerts, and much more. And yes, it's still the site of ghost hunts and apparent paranormal activity. Genuinely, it seems like everyone who has set foot in the cemetery has a story. So of course, I needed to see it for myself. I had wanted to visit Bachelor's Grove for a long time. I was transfixed by it when I first saw the Ghost Avengers episode, because I used to be in the Ghost Avengers fandom. And in high school and college, I was really into visiting haunted locations, and still am. As I mentioned in my video on the history of ghost hunting, in high school I actually did catch 2 EVPs at an abandoned lot near my school. I went there with 2 friends after school, and we didn't really think much of it. I think we were just goofing around. We spent only a few minutes there total the first time, and when listening back to the recording, we didn't hear anything until the very end, when suddenly a very clear male voice appeared. We were super freaked out because no one with a male voice was around and none of us made a noise like that. When we went back a second time, we captured the same voice again. I consider myself a skeptic in many ways, but I've never been able to figure out an alternate explanation for either of these. So, needless to say, I was very excited to give the notorious Bachelor's Grove a chance to show me something. I mean, the EVPs that I caught something like 12 years ago were taken in just some random neighborhood lot with flimsy and largely unknown urban legends. Surely I'll catch something at the most haunted cemetery in the US. I went last week with my girlfriend down to Midlothian where the cemetery sits. We made the mistake of following Google Maps the first time, which had us clambering through the trees and brush and thorns rather than walking along the road like you're supposed to. I think we got tripped up by the closed sign. At least we got a good look at the pond that was supposedly the mob's dumping ground for bodies. Didn't sense any spirits there, was just very distracted by how green the algae was. It was like cartoonishly green. Don't worry, we figured the correct way out eventually. I firmly expected to walk in and instantly be hit with like bad energy or something, but the first thing that came to mind was how beautiful it was. The weather was perfect and autumnal, golden trees and sunlight coming through the branches and dappled little rays. It's very well cared for by the Cook County Forest Preserve. For a while we just sat on the grass, ate cheese and crackers, and listened in silence. Some other visitors floated through, a couple of them clambering through the woods. I was very pleased to note they were very respectful, as you should be in a cemetery. Still, I heard nothing but cars, falling leaves, bugs, and a squirrel that was going to town on an acorn. Oh, it's a squirrel. Oh, he's got an acorn. Likely thing for a squirrel to have. Eventually we went around and placed flowers and bread on all of the headstones, including the ones that aren't there anymore because we didn't want to leave anybody out. There may be some people we missed because they're, you know, the bases of their headstones are like covered up by grass now. I don't know. It's a bummer. I wish they were all still there. And then he wondered why all the ghosts were just mad all the time.
Yeah. Gee,
I mean, you come into my house, tell me to attack you, get spooked when I attack you or your little friend Aaron. We waited, took photos, waited, took audio, waited, and nothing happened. Now, if Zach Bagans were here, he would say something along the lines of, could it be possible that the squirrel behind us is working on behalf of the devil? Here's the thing. I knew going in that my perspective was going to be colored by wanting something to happen, because of course I did. I mean, shit, I'm making a video. How cool would that be? And also, you know, I've heard all of the stories. I wanted something to happen to me too. It's happened to everybody else. But pretty much nothing happened. The only thing I can say that was odd was when I was walking around recording audio, a stick in front of me on the ground like lifted up and spun around in a very unnatural way. I looked around in case it was like an animal or a very strong bug, or maybe even the wind, but I don't have an explanation for that. I need you to go in the basement. What was that? Yeah, I'm not seeing anything. Do you think Zach Bagans lied to me? He wouldn't do that. I follow him on Twitter. He's important to me, Zachary Bagels. Would he lie to me? He wouldn't. He wouldn't do that. I was in the Ghost Adventures fandom in 2011. What the fuck was that? He didn't lie to me. Oh my god. So that's all I got, and I didn't even catch it on camera, so you can decide if you believe me or not about this stick. No shadow figures, no orbs of light, no mist, voices, bad feelings, nothing. Although my girlfriend did say a couple of times that she thought she saw shadows moving and did catch some admittedly kind of weird shadows in the picture she took, but nothing crazy, just weird. I'll tell you what I did experience though. It was very peaceful and serene. I would go back any day, 100%, no questions asked. Maybe the residents of the cemetery are happy that the worst days of vandalism are over, that they have a clean and well-groomed resting place now. Maybe they could sense our intentions. Maybe they were happy about the offerings we left. Maybe that's why they didn't punish me for my bad Zach Bagans impersonation. Maybe there's no ghosts at all. Zach Bagans wouldn't.
Of course not.
No. I'm going through the 7 stages of grief right now. In all seriousness, though, this is easily one of the most peaceful cemeteries I've ever been to. Very chill vibes.
It's beautiful here.
Lovely light. Leaves on ground, squirrel with acorn. The most disturbance we've gotten has been from like random people also here to visit the cemetery and realizing fairly quickly that it's not scary and then they leave.
I thought I saw another shadow.
Oh, that's nice. 10 out of 10. I'm gonna leave it a good review on Yelp. I think a lot of places like this maybe also can reflect the energy that you bring in, but I did not see or hear any ghosts in Bachelor's Grove Cemetery. As Mark West writes in Necro Waste and Hauntology, Ghost Specters and the Infinitive Responsibility of the Past, we live in a world marked by the dead. A world where ossuaries and cemeteries dot the landscape, where the memorials to those long gone tower over both city and countryside. The most popular tourist sites in the world, from the pyramids to Saint Denis to St. George's Chapel, all house corpses. The dead don't walk among us, for there is no need for that. We walk to them, bearing gifts of flowers. We are haunted, haunting ourselves, with our imaginations and our memories. Here's maybe a silly personal problem that I have. I have never seen a ghost in a place where I'm supposed to see one. I've been to hundreds of cemeteries, old manors, castles, houses, universities, battlegrounds. No ghost sightings. You know where the ghost did find me? Random lot near my high school. My new build house growing up in LA, my cockroach and mold infested apartment in college, but to be fair, maybe that was the mold. My dorm in college, which was a really funny one because the ghost kept manifesting random bras in our room, and it wasn't any of our bras, and no one in our room was having hot babes over, so where were the bras coming from? I don't know, it's just a funny thing that keeps happening to me. Anyway, my point is, maybe ghosts aren't harassing me in cemeteries because I go in there with a pure heart. Just kidding. I mean that it's just a coincidence. Maybe, I don't know. I'm not inclined to read into things that happen to me in a cemetery because truth be told, I just love being in a cemetery. They're so beautiful and peaceful. I love looking at all the names and seeing what headstone art or symbolism I can find. I like sitting there and letting it sort of wash over me, the immense reality of all of the lives beneath my feet, how I'm surrounded by so many stories, some that are waiting to be told, some we know, and others that are gone forever, laying in silence underground with the bones that lived them. What could possibly be a more beautiful summation of being a human? We all want to live full and vibrant lives. Many of us don't get to. At the end of it all, we all just want a peaceful place to rest. Life was and is hard enough for all of us. Please be kind to the dead. They aren't scary demons or zombies. They're nothing to be afraid of. They were real people before they were a desecrated headstone. Leave them some bread and let them tell you their story. Thank you for learning with me about Bachelor's Grove Cemetery. I hope you're having a wonderful spooky season, and until next time, wash thy hands, wear thy mask, and don't follow any blue lights into the woods.